Thanks for having me here. Yeah, today I'm going to talk to you about cultivating respect for insects.
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
And they are, without a doubt, the most successful and, honestly, the most important animals on Earth. And we can argue that from a bunch of different perspectives. We're going to talk about that today. My name is Dr. Daniel Paul Duran, and I'm a professor at Rowan University. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. And I'm an entomologist. I study insects for a living, right? So that's kind of cool. I mean, when I was your age, I was really interested in insects. And now here I am, 46, and I still play with insects. So it's kind of cool. You can do that if you work hard enough. You can actually make it into a living. So I want to show you there's so many amazing things on this planet. I mean, there's just tons and tons of diversity, all kinds of different animals and plants. And here's just some crazy different things that we can see on this planet. We have stuff like honey creeper birds. We have flatworms that live in the ocean that are rainbow colors and don't even look real. They look made up. And you have all of these crazy different things around, including comb jellies, which are basically, they look like jellyfish, but they glow rainbow. Very closely related to jellyfish. It's amazing, all the things that live in the ocean. And, you know, when you look at all this diversity of life on Earth, what you're surprised to find out is that about 60% of all living things are insects, just insects. Insects are absolutely dominant on this planet. If you were an alien and you came down to Earth and you had to write a report to your boss and say what kind of creatures are on this planet, you would say there's a whole bunch of insects, and then there's some other stuff. There's some plants and then some other things. But yeah, I mean, there's just tons and tons of insects, and plants and insects alone are about 85% of all living things on the planet, right? So tons and tons of things. Insects, 1 million species out of about 1.6 million species that are known on Earth. And new species are being discovered all the time. In fact, I've discovered and described 13 new species to science, previously unknown. Here's one that I just published in the winter called Untitled, which was a fun name to come up with. Mycokyla means it has a long lip, because the front lip, I don't know if you can see that, it's kind of cream colored. It's really long, and we don't know why their front lip is so long. Actually, there's a lot of things we don't know about them. But this is only known from one mountain range in Mexico and nowhere else on the planet. So that's pretty cool. There's lots of new things out there. And we think that in real life, there's probably about 5 million species of insects. We've only discovered about 1 million of them. So if there's so many insects, I have a question for y'all, which is, what makes insects so successful? What do you think? Why do you, am I allowed to do this, by the way, Miss Barton? Am I allowed to ask them questions when they interact like this?
Oh, sorry. Yes, you guys can, if your background is not noisy like mine, I'm in a little quiet space, you guys can leave your microphones unmuted, or you can unmute and answer. So ask one more time and we'll see who'd like to answer for us.
Yeah, so there are so many types of insects on planet Earth. I'm just curious if any of you have a guess as to why there's so many insects. Like, why are insects so successful? Yes, I see you there. I can't see names. Your hand is up.
Is that Spencer? Are you scratching your eye? Or are you raising your hand? Oh, Josh, just unmute. And Brooklyn, just unmute. You guys, let's do it like a classroom where you just share. Go, Brooklyn.
Okay, I think that maybe it is because they're really, really small and they have adaptations that allow them to camouflage into their surroundings. So maybe they're not like picked off as easily because they can camouflage.
Josh,
awesome.
What's your idea, Josh?
So I think it's because for us as humans, we kind of live in this big civilization built for all of us. But most insects, from my knowledge, live together in like a colony, so that if an intruder comes, they can defend them as a stronger group, I guess.
There you go. Okay, well, Amelia, what do you think? Amelia?
I don't know why my camera's not working, but what I think is because they reproduce so quickly.
Oh, good idea.
Okay. There's lots of them.
Lots are really great. It looks like we got one more. Adam there.
Adam Walton.
I think any reason insects are so successful is because they can fit in spaces. Since their size, they're usually small enough to fit it in the smaller nooks and crannies in the ground or in trees. So they're able to hide and have greater protection from predators since they're able to hide from them. So since they're able to hide so well, they and probably reproduce quickly. That's probably another reason why they're so successful. Like they're just so able to like hide and be able to defend themselves.
Thanks, Adam.
Okay, so we heard a lot of different things. Really excellent answers. And in fact, you guys hit some of the things that I was going to say. Absolutely. So I heard two people say something about them being small. Absolutely. And like you said in great detail, they can hide in little tiny places. There's lots of things they can do. There's lots more different types of living that you can make when you're tiny, right? You could live just between the layers of a leaf. And there's no way a mammal can do that, right? Because they're just too big. Even a small mammal can't do that. Heard camouflage. We're going to totally talk about that. That's absolutely true. Lots of insects are amazing at camouflaging. And we'll show you some examples of that. And then I heard about the social insect thing. Actually, most insects are not social. The vast majority are not. But those that are social are really successful. So that's a great point, too. Absolutely. So awesome. So I'm going to tell you the most significant thing that insects have that makes them so successful, besides being small and those other things, is their skin. Their skin is unlike the skin of any other types of organisms on this planet. Their skin is absolutely amazing because not only is it hard, or usually very often hard, it is waterproof, and it has all kinds of properties that enable them to be able to protect themselves. So this here is a type of hispine beetle. It's known from parts of West Africa, and I actually got to see these when I was in Equatorial Guinea. You don't want to eat one of these. Never eat one of these, right? So I don't think any of you are going to do that anyway, but if you're a bird, you might try. And that would be a bad decision because these could get stuck in your throat. So they're really, really wearing basically a suit of armor, right? I mean, that's a crazy looking thing. It looks like it's out of science fiction, but it's real. Absolutely real. I know. I've seen them in the wild. And here's another example of another beetle. I study beetles, so you're going to get a very beetle-heavy talk. But this is another beetle, and it's got an amazing shine to it, right? And so that shine is from a waxy layer that's actually on top of the skin that many, many insects have, most insects have, and it enables them to keep from drying out. So that waxy layer keeps them from drying out, and they can live in places like deserts, like this beetle does, right? And they can be out in deserts when lots of animals could never survive in those deserts. Now, another thing the skin of insects can do is it can have all kinds of crazy pigments in it that make amazing colors. I mean, I think these are stunningly beautiful animals. I mean, you look at them, you say, they almost don't look real. If you saw them and I said, I got these from Mars, you might believe me. I mean, they look like they're from another planet, right? But they're real and they're all from here. And so one of the questions is, why do they have all these colors in their skin? And we're not sure in all cases. In the case of the one down here in the lower left, the black shiny one with the bright red spots, that almost certainly is a warning that it's extremely poisonous. And again, poisonous doesn't mean that it's going to hurt you unless you do something. You have to eat it or get it on you in order for it to hurt you. It's not going to come after you and hurt you. I've seen these many times. I'm not scared of them, but I would never eat one, right? So, and then some of the time, these colors are probably related to their ability to find each other. So be able to find other members of the same species, find, mates and stuff like that. So that's something that could be happening. And again, skin, crazy things you can do with it. You can have hairs, you can have spines, and these are all different kinds of caterpillars that are extremely toxic, super poisonous. I think this one on the left looks like light bright pegs. They kind of look to me like something like that. Do you guys still have light bright? Is that a thing? I feel like that's maybe still a thing. I'm not sure. But anyway, when I was a kid, there was a thing called light bright, and it kind of reminds me of these ones on the left. I took that picture in Panama. We have this one here where I'm from. This one in the upper right is called a stinging rose caterpillar, and it's found in the eastern United States, and I've seen it in New Jersey where I live, and it is just, you don't want to get stung. I mean, it's very, very, very painful. Okay, now the skin of insects can also have, in addition to hairs and spines, it can have little scales. And those scales can make all kinds of beautiful colors as well. And so I got a question for you. What kind of an insect are we looking at here, this beautiful insect? Any idea what kind of an insect this is? take a couple of guesses.
Adam Walton, what do you think?
Well, I think it is like some kind of butterfly. It looks more like a butterfly than it does like a moth.
Okay, so we got a butterfly. Anybody else think it's a butterfly? Couple people maybe. Okay, does anybody think this is something else? Miss Barton thinks it's something else. Miss Barton, what do you think it is?
I think it might be a moth. I'm going to contradict Adam just for fun to see what if we have another option.
It is not a butterfly. It is in fact a moth. So now the question becomes, if that beautiful thing is a moth and this drab thing here on the right is a butterfly, how do you tell a moth from a butterfly, right? I mean, that's a question that most adults do not know the answer to, because many people think that moths are drab and butterflies are pretty, but I can tell you there is no reality to that. Most butterflies look like dirt or leaves. Many moths look like dirt or leaves too, but there's some beautiful moths and there's some beautiful butterflies. And so I just think it's really interesting. So anybody have a guess as to how you can tell a moth from a butterfly?
Spencer, what do you think? Take a guess.
I don't know. By looking at these pictures, the butterfly looks like it has 2 wings and the moth looks like it has 4.
That's a good observation, but it's actually just the way the butterfly is holding its wings. It also has 4, but I can totally see that.
Emery, what were you thinking?
Maybe the shape of the wings.
So another good guess, there's tons of variation. There are moths with big wings, with squarish wings, with triangular wings, butterflies with the same. So it's not the shape of the wings, but good guess.
And Josh?
So from my observations, from the last picture, it looks like the moths have kind of more bulky bodies, I guess, than compared to butterflies.
That's a good guess. It's a really good guess. And I'll tell you what, Josh, that is usually true. It's not always true, but it is very frequently true. Moths are often bulkier bodies and often furrier, but there's definitely exceptions to that too. So here's the way you tell them apart. It's the antennae. The antennae of butterflies always have a club at the end. They always come to a tip that's wider, and moths never have that. Moths either have a long, thin antenna in the case of the females, or a comb-like antenna in the case of the males, but butterflies never have combs. They're never long and thin. They always end in a blunt club like that. So that is the way you tell them apart. A couple of other things that are usually, moths are usually out at night. Only about 10% of them out during the day, and butterflies are only out during the day. So it's almost perfect. It's not quite. If you see something during the day, it's almost certainly a butterfly. If you see something at night, it's definitely a moth. And so that's how that works. But yeah, so that also means that those little white, I don't know if you have them in Idaho, but there's those little white butterflies that we have all over the eastern U.S. With a little black spot on them. And everybody thinks that they're moths, but they're actually a type of butterfly because you see them out during the day, probably a butterfly.
Awesome.
Okay, so somebody mentioned camouflage. Well, here's the type of camouflage. This thing here is an assassin bug. I'm sorry, an ambush bug, I meant to say. And this ambush bug has a crazy shape to it. And it's got colors, like it's got parts of a flower that are kind of dying. So it looks like parts of flowers that are kind of falling apart. Or it is. You can see the eye right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
My cursor visible? Okay, great. So you can see the eye right here. There's the head. There's the front leg, there's the middle leg, and there's the hind leg. And there's the big middle part of the body known as the thorax that has all the legs and wings that come off of it. And then here's the rest of the body known as the abdomen, right? So there it is, and it's about to eat that ant, which is not long for this world because it is right about to go grab it. Okay, so the skin of insects can do all kinds of things, like, again, have pigments and hairs and things like that that make it blend in, or not blend in with the background, but look like somebody else. And so we can call this mimicry, right? So they look like somebody else. I'm showing you things that look like bumblebees. Only one of these is actually a bumblebee. The other three are mimics. So I'm just curious. So maybe we'll do like a show of hands here. Who thinks that this one up here in the upper left is the true bumblebee? Okay, a couple people. What about this one here in the upper right? Okay, Miss Barton. What about this one in the lower left? Anybody? Nobody seems to think that one is. What about this one in the lower right? Anybody? So it turns out the one in the lower right is the true bumblebee.
Oh.
All the other ones are flies. All the other ones are flies. And how can you tell? You can tell because of a couple of things. But anybody want to try this one here? Let's see if anybody has a good guess. What do you think is different between a true bumblebee and all of these flies? There's actually like 3 things. Well, there's actually like 4 or 5 things to make them different.
Josh, what do you think?
So the other hairs kind of look like the other legs look like they're a lot hairier compared to the actual bumblebee.
That's interesting. That's probably just these particular species. I mean, it's again, you can only base on what you're looking at, so I can totally see what you're talking about. But it turns out that's not a reliable way to tell them apart.
Zeke, what do you think?
I think doesn't the aren't some fake bumblebees like they're flies and they have 4 wings?
The flies only have 2 wings and the bumblebees have 4, but it's really hard to tell that. The number of wings is absolutely totally diagnostic here. Flies only ever have 2 wings, and almost all winged insects have 4. Flies are really weird that they only have 2. But when they hold them over their back like this, you really can't count the wings. But if you could, you would be able to tell them apart that way.
And Amelia, do you have something for us?
I like in the pictures I see that the bumblebee has shorter front legs than the rest.
That's totally just the angle of that picture. You're right. I can see what you're talking about. Totally see it. But that's actually just the way that when the picture was snapped, it happened to kind of pull its legs back. So that's not. But that's a great observation. It just turns out that's not a reliable thing. So the big difference is the eyes. The eyes in a bumblebee take up like a small percentage of the head. They're only like about 10-20% of the size of the head. Whereas the eyes in true flies are huge. They're like half the head to almost the entire head. Like in this one here, they're almost the whole head is eyes. And the eyes are really big and they bulge out to the side. Whereas the eyes are just kind of inserted inside of the head here in the true bumblebee. And the antennae are different. The tongue is different. There's other differences. But anyway, they're doing a great job because most of you didn't know that it was. I mean, how would you know if you're a bird? You never know that this was a bumblebee or a fly. And why do you want to look like a bumblebee? Because things will leave you alone because they don't want to get stung, right? So that's one of the things. And if you ever see a bumblebee that's carrying off another bumblebee, it's not a bumblebee. It's one of these flies. And these flies not only look like bumblebees, but they eat bumblebees. They totally, they take every advantage of looking like a bumblebee. It's pretty cool. Okay, so when people find out I'm an entomologist and I study insects, I often get asked questions like, why should I care about insects? Aren't insects mostly pests anyway? I mean, or do you study how to get rid of them? And there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. But I want to put this in perspective. Like I said, there's slightly over 1 million species of insects that have been described, and we think that there's really between 3 and 8 million, probably just about 5 million species in the world. Only about 800 species of insects are actual pests, which means that over 99.9% of insects are not pests. We spend all of our time talking about the few bad ones. But most of them are not only not bad, they're keeping us alive, right? So I think it's really important to think about how valuable insects are to us, not just how we can get rid of the bad ones. So to just take that question back, why should I care about insects? You could not survive without them. Insects are the most important animals to life on Earth. Without insects, all life on Earth ceases immediately. So here's an important thing that insects do, right? They do things like pollination, which is when an insect visits a flower They get nectar from the flower. That's the deal. The flower's like, hey, if you come and visit me, I'll give you some sugar water, which you can use for energy. And in the process, they move pollen back and forth between flowers, and that allows the flower and seeds and all these things that we can't get without pollination. Really important stuff, right? A lot of our food comes from pollination. And so I got a question for the class here. What kind of insects pollinate flowers? There's many kinds, but I just want to see what y'all think.
Spencer, what's on your mind?
Don't bees pollinate flowers?
Yeah, absolutely. Bees, including these honeybees here.
Anything else? Arwan.
I believe butterflies pollinate flowers.
Yep, butterflies do as well. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Any other kinds of insects?
Adam.
Well, this is really just a guess. I don't know if it's true or not. But a lot of these like animals or insects that come they usually come to the flowers to get nectar, and in the process they get pollen. Which then when they go to another flower they pollinate them. So I'm just guessing, but I doubt it's actually true, but couldn't hummingbirds possibly help pollinate flowers? But I don't think that works.
Oh, yeah, hummingbirds do, but we're asking what kind of insects pollinate flowers. But yes, hummingbirds do. Yes, they do. They definitely do some pollination. Any other kinds of insects that anybody can think of? So we got bees and we got butterflies.
Okay, Emery and Amelia have a guess. Go, Emery.
Don't moths pollinate?
That's one very few people ever guess, but you're right. Some moths do. A pretty small percentage of moths, but there are some that do. And most moths that pollinate at night.
Okay, Amelia.
There's also flies and beetles. They pollinate too.
Absolutely. That's awesome because rarely do people guess flies and beetles. Flies and beetles are super important. In fact, beetles pollinate more kinds of plants than bees do, which shocks almost everybody. Nobody believes this. Even a lot of entomologists are shocked by this one. But I study beetles, so I'm not surprised by this because people say, I've never seen a beetle in a flower. Well, come with me. You want to see a beetle in a flower, come with me because many of the beetles that pollinate flowers are tiny, right? If you look at this picture of this flower here, you can see they almost look like dust. They're tiny, tiny, tiny things, and you may not even notice them on the flower. Some of them live like these ones right here. These are catarrhid beetles, or shining flower beetles. They live deep inside the flower parts. Some of them may only pollinate at night. Some of them may only pollinate for a few days out of the year. There's all kinds of reasons why you might not see beetles, but they're there. Now, this is a bigger beetle. This is a flower longhorn beetle, and there's some beautiful flower longhorn beetles out there. I mean, some of them are just stunning things. And here's another reason why you might be surprised and say you've never seen a beetle pollinate a flower. Sometimes what you think is a wasp is actually a beetle. So some of these are really good at imitating wasps, mimicking wasps. The one in the lower right here, not only does it have the exact kind of stripy black and yellow pattern and red legs, but they fidget and make squeaky sounds just like a wasp. When they fly, they buzz like a wasp. So everybody thinks they're wasp, but it's actually a type of beetle. All right. So we also heard flies can be pollinators, and that's absolutely true. All of these are flies. I know many of them look like they're bees, but they're all flies. And again, most flies are going to live on flowers. They're going to want to look like bees, right? Because it means things will leave them alone. Now, the one in the lower right, what kind of an insect is that?
Open your mic and share if you have a guess. Adam?
Oh. Okay. First, I want to talk about mosquitoes just a little bit. So, the only mosquitoes that bite and drink your blood are the female mosquitoes. And the male mosquitoes, they actually drink nectar from flowers.
Absolutely. And that is a male mosquito. You're 100% correct. That's really great. And here's another thing that one of the reasons why when I show this slide, people get confused is they say, well, you got 3 flies and a mosquito. And I sometimes forget what normal people know. And I'll ask my wife, I'm like, Missy, do people know that mosquitoes are a type of fly? And she's like, no, people don't know that. I'm like, okay, well, there you go. Mosquitoes are a type of fly. So they're a weird type of fly, but they are a type of fly. But they are not their own group of insects. They are nested within the flies. So, yep. And nobody likes to hear what we just heard from, I think it was Adam, that male mosquitoes are pollinators, because people often like there to be good guys and bad guys, and they don't like it when it gets complicated. And it gets complicated. So anyway, yes, male mosquitoes are pollinators, and many flies are pollinators. And flies are really important pollinators. In fact, this beautiful flower here, which is endangered, this is the Pine Barrens gentian, which is only found in one little spot in New Jersey and another spot in North Carolina. This thing here is only pollinated by flies. No other insects can pollinate it except for flies. That's all. So flies can be great. They can be really beneficial. Hoverflies have larvae, which are just babies, right? That eat aphids. They're predators of aphids, which are legitimate pests. And the adults pollinate flowers. So think about it. They do pest control and pollination, all the same organism in the different parts of his life stage. That's a super beneficial insect. We love hoverflies. They're great. Okay, now I'm going to tell you something crazy that none of your friends know, and none of your parents know, and none of your teachers know, okay? You're the only people that are going to know this thing that you know, that I'm about to tell you. So what we have here is a type of midge, which is a type of fly. And on the right, we got a weird plant. It's kind of a shrub to a small tree, and it's got flowers that come straight out of the bark. And it is only pollinated by these little flies that you can see here. And it turns out that is the fruit of the cacao plant that's created by those flies when they pollinate it, and it's what we turn into chocolate. So without flies, there would be no chocolate, right? Which is amazing. Don't worry, you're not eating flies when you eat chocolate, but it is one of those things where you can't have chocolate without flies helping to pollinate those flowers. So that's pretty cool. All right, and we heard butterflies can be pollinators. Actually, I'm super impressed. I don't think I've ever had a group of students or adults who've ever guessed all the major groups of pollinators in like 1 minute. So, and then as we heard, moths can also be pollinators too, right? This is one of those weird moths. I told you a small percentage of moths fly during the day. This is one of those ones that flies during the day. In fact, they look like hummingbirds. They call them hummingbird moths. They not only do they hover like a hummingbird, but their wings are clear. So when they're beating their wings, they look like they're going even faster than they are, which makes them look more like a hummingbird. They even have a fake tail. There's a fake tail here. See all this area right there? There's no real tail on a moth. So it's and why would you want to look like a hummingbird? That's a really weird thing, because hummingbirds aren't poisonous. They can't hurt you. So why would you want to look like a hummingbird? Any guesses on that one?
Let's see. What do you think, Zeke?
So that like predators don't eat them. So they look like hummingbirds and they don't want to eat them.
But why wouldn't they want to eat a hummingbird? Because hummingbirds aren't poisonous or anything. It's a good guess, but
If it's like another insect, like the hummingbird could like beat them easily. So like
okay. We think it's something a little different, but that's a good guess. Yeah.
Emery?
Maybe because, basically what Zeke said, but since they don't hurt anything, they won't hurt them.
Oh, so
a predator probably won't worry about being hurt by a thing they think they're going to eat. I mean, it's a good guess, but this is a hard one. Don't worry. This is really hard. This is a really hard one.
Okay, Spencer, one more guess, and then we're going to let Dr. Dan tell us.
Okay. So don't hummingbirds eat moths?
No, hummingbirds drink nectar most of the time.
Okay. Well then.
Okay, so here's the thing. Hummingbirds are really, really fast. Hummingbirds can change directions really fast. Most predators can't catch a hummingbird. So if you look like something that's super fast, the most predators are just going to like, I'm not even going to bother trying to chase that thing. So they're not poisonous, they're not dangerous, they can't fight back, but they look like they could get away if they wanted to. So that's the idea. So that's a hard one. Don't worry, most adults would never get that one. So I just figured I'd ask because you guys have great guesses. I love the things that you guys say. So this here is one of my favorite birds. This is a black Burnian warbler. And these, like most birds, like 96% of birds, almost all birds, eat insects at some point in their life. 96% of birds. Because a lot of people say, well, birds come to bird feeders. Very few birds come to bird feeders. It's an extremely small percentage of all the birds that are out there. There's many hundreds of species of birds in the United States, and probably like 20 or 30 of them come to bird feeders, right, on a regular basis. Most birds eat insects, and so without insects, there would be no birds. So this one here, you can see there's another black Burnian warbler, and he's got himself a caterpillar. I know that looks like a twig, but it's actually a type of geometric caterpillar, which is inchworm moth caterpillar, and he has no problem telling that that's a caterpillar because he's a professional caterpillar finder. So he knows how to do that.
Wow.
Here's another bird. This is a palm warbler. Did real well for himself. Got a very large caterpillar. And I want to just talk about one or two other types of insects that are really beneficial, and see what you all think of some of the next stuff coming up. But this here is a dragonfly, and dragonflies eat a lot of mosquitoes. That's right. Dragonflies eat tons of mosquitoes, more than many things which people talk about. Like people say, oh, bats and, purple martin, which is a type of bird. Turns out dragonflies probably eat more than even they do, right? And here's another great, I see Adam has his hand up.
Oh, when the four dragonflies, they're really good at quickly figuring out, like, let's say like a mosquito's fly, they're really good at figuring out, okay, if I fly this way, I'll intercept it here, and they're really good at that. And also when a younger dragonfly, before it comes out of the water and grows its wings, they eat mosquito larvae, which live in the water. So they eat mosquitoes for practically their whole entire lives.
Wow.
Yeah, 100%. You know a lot of things. That's totally true. And in fact, to follow up on that, the dragonfly nymphs, the baby dragonflies that don't have wings yet, live in the water, they probably eat more mosquitoes in some species than the adults do. So they eat tons and tons of mosquitoes. Now, to be completely fair, they don't only eat mosquitoes. So I don't want you to think like, oh, everything they eat is a mosquito, but they eat a lot of mosquitoes. They really do. And also, as we heard from Adam too, they are incredibly efficient predators. In fact, according to some research, they are the best, most efficient predators ever studied. Way better than a great white shark. Like great white sharks and lions and things like that, they miss a lot. Dragonflies never miss, pretty much never miss. So everything that they go for, they get. It's pretty cool. Now, these are cool, adorable insects. I love them. They don't even look real. They look like somebody made a plush toy of what they thought an insect was supposed to look like. But these adorable little things are called springtails, and they're all over the place. I guarantee you, if you went outside your school right now and you picked up one fistful of dirt and you put it into a special device called a Berlese funnel, which pulls all the little tiny microscopic insects out of it, you would get dozens to hundreds of these in every handful of dirt. They're all over the planet. Super cool. And it turns out that about 1/5 of our dirt is made by them. They make tons of dirt. They eat things like algae and different kinds of microbes, like you heard about with Dr. Ann Madden's talk. They eat all kinds of things like that, like fungi, lichens, all kinds of different microbes. And when they poop it out, it actually starts making soil. So I know that's unpleasant, but there wouldn't be plants without them. It's really important. And some of them are absolutely beautiful. They have all kinds of cool rainbow colors on them. These are so tiny. I want you to understand how tiny these are. They're about 1/10 the length of your fingernail on your pinky, right? So these are really, really tiny little things. You could fit about 10 of them in a row on your pinky fingernail. They're each about a 32nd of an inch or so long, anywhere from like a 32nd to a 16th of an inch long. And but if they were the size of like birds, we would have field guides to these because they're beautiful things, right? So I just want to kind of wrap up by saying how important insects are for our survival. We have many different kinds of things that eat pests, things that make dirt. These are all great things. So I want to kind of end the talk with how did I become an entomologist, right? And so that's, I think, an important thing. And I believe that Dr. Madden also talked about similar things to this. So I was inspired by meeting a scientist called Howard Boyd. He was a really well-known expert on tiger beetles. And I was doing a project with my professor when I was in college looking at tiger beetles in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, which is a part of the state where I'm from. And so I was finding this one tiger beetle. I was getting hundreds of them in my traps. And it was supposed to be rare. So I met Howard Boyd and I said to him, I'm getting these unipunctata in my traps, Epterodella unipunctata. And he said, how many have you seen? I said, about 200 this week. And he said, I don't think there's that many ever known that's in all the world's museums. But what I saw in 1 week was more than anyone had ever seen in all the history of the world. And I'm like, how is that possible? And I still don't really know how I got so many in my traps. But in any case, what was important about it was I'm 20 years old, and here's this guy who's a world's expert, and he's like, you should study tiger beetles. And I'm like, I found something that a world's expert didn't know about? That's amazing, and I'm just a kid. I know you guys don't think 20 is a kid, but I'm only 20, this very young to be making major discoveries. So I decided that I would get a Master of Science degree in entomology, which is basically like going to college, but going a little further and doing even more. And it's part of becoming like a professional scientist. So I went to University of Missouri, and it was really scary for me because I only ever grew up in New Jersey, and all of a sudden I'm moving, 1,000 miles away to another state. It was very scary, but I'm glad I did it because, I learned a lot. I met a lot of people. And when I was there, I got super interested in tiger beetles, and I ended up writing a guy who was like a really big expert in DNA of beetles, and he was at the Natural History Museum in London, England. And he said to me, why don't you come to London and I'll train you on how to do DNA work. You're already becoming an expert in beetles, but I can train you in that. And I'm 24 years old, and I'm thinking, of course I'm going to move to London, England to do this. This sounds awesome, but it's scary, right? It's really scary to move across the world where you don't know anybody at all and, take a job where you're not even from there. It's very difficult, but I'm glad that I was adventurous enough to have done that. And when I was there, I actually invented a new way to extract DNA from museum specimens that nobody had ever done before, and I got kind of famous for it. So that led to me getting an offer from a guy in Panama, and he said, I'd love you to come down to the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute and train my lab in how to extract DNA from specimens, and maybe we can do some field work and go out and look for beetles and things like that too while you're here, because I know you're a beetle expert. And I said, yeah, I'm going to move to Panama now. So I'm moving all over the world. And when I was there, everybody kept calling me doctor because they all thought I had my PhD, and I didn't. And so I got tired of being called doctor when I wasn't, and I decided to go back to the United States and actually get my doctorate, which is a lot of work, let me tell you that. It's 6 years of your life, and it's a hard 6 years, but I'm glad I did it. There were times where I wanted to quit. And honestly, the most important thing about becoming a scientist is not being curious. People tell you it's really important to be curious to be a scientist. Most important thing is not giving up. That is by far the most important thing in science, is saying, I am not going to stop doing this just because it's really hard right now. And so I went to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had it was tough at times. It was a great time at other times. So I got to do all kinds of cool stuff. When I was in Panama, I actually found a new species in the rainforest, and my brothers came to visit me, and we went out and we saw this we found a beetle in the forest, And I realized it was a new species. It was unknown to science. And so I named it after my brothers. I named it Odontocheila fraternum. Fraternum means for the brothers. And so my mother was very happy that I named it for my brothers. She really liked that. And so it's a tiger beetle. I've been talking about tiger beetles, but I haven't really shown you one. They're absolutely beautiful things. I mean, they're crazy beautiful things, right? They have incredible jaws, which is where they get the name tiger beetle from. Many of them are beautiful rainbow colors. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. These are ones from all over the world. Some of them look like dirt or sand, but we don't really know why, because the ones that are very brightly colored are not more toxic. You would think that they would be, but they're not. So nobody really knows why. And then I became such a world's expert on tiger beetles that I actually got to write a book with a couple of other experts. And so that was pretty fun. I got to write a book in my 30s, which cured me of writing a book until my 50s, I think. So it was fun, but it was also not fun. But anyway, it got done. So let me just put it that way. So I've described, like I said, a bunch of new species. Here's the new species that I actually named for my wife. It was a Valentine's Day present. I named it Cicindolidia, which means the little tiger beetle, and Melissa, because her name is Melissa. And I told her I was going to name it something else. I kept it a secret. And when the paper came out, I said, "Hey, Missy, check it out. Here's my new species description." And she's like, "Oh, this looks really cool. The pictures are beautiful." I'm like, no, just read the introduction. And she's like, "I don't even understand any of these words." I'm like, no, literally read the first couple of sentences. And then she's like, "Wait, you named it after me." She couldn't believe that. So that was pretty fun. And if you want to find new species, you got to go to remote places where no sane person would ever go. This is a ponderosa pine forest at 8,000 feet in the Chiricahua Mountains in southeastern Arizona. And if you want to find Cicindolidia Melissa, you got to be there after a forest fire and a rain at the right time of year. And you got about a day or two for the be out. And then the other 363 days of the year, they're gone. So if you find a new species, it's because you were doing something pretty special. I get to travel all over. I just got a few more slides to show you real quick. I get to go to places like this beautiful spot. This here is in Arizona. This is near Prescott. I get to go to amazing places like this here. This is the Organ Pipe Mountains in New Mexico. Oh, this is my background. I just realized this is my background for Zoom. But I took this picture in Big Bend National Park in Texas. What a beautiful place. Also Big Bend National Park here and here. And I get to see crazy insects. There are giant insects all over the world. This one here is only found around Roswell, New Mexico, and it looks like a glowing blue alien brain. Never pick up one of these. This one is so poisonous that if you pick it up, it actually bleeds poisons out of its joints, and they can burn your hand, which is crazy, right? So there's some extreme insects out there in the world. And here's my last picture, is just a beautiful moth, just reinforcing how beautiful moths can be, that I found in a gas station in Evanston, Wyoming. So that's what I got for you. Happy to take any questions you have about insects at all, or anything about becoming a scientist. Love to hear your questions.
Wow, Dan, that made me a lot more interested in bugs. Lots more interested. Zeke, did you have a question?
Don't also hawk moths pollinate flowers?
Yep, hawk moths are one of the types of moths, probably more than any other group of moths, that pollinate flowers. Absolutely. Wow. You guys know crazy stuff. I don't know what they're doing out there, but obviously Miss Barton does a good job.
Well, I'm not alone. I have a team, and these guys are this group of students are 10 and 11-year-olds. So they've really worked hard their 10 and 11 years of life. Adam.
Wow.
One of the main reasons I know so much about animals is because as when I was younger, well, maybe like a year or two ago, I watched a lot of wild crats, which they go a lot into animals and stuff.
Adam,
that's how I know so much.
That makes me really excited to see that was your path, because on day 2 of our science summer camp, we're going to be talking about the importance of science communication. So what if people like Dr. Duran didn't stop and take his time today to teach us what he knows? And what if you don't have different groups that you can rely on to help, share the information. So keep that in mind while we're in Yellowstone, because on day 2, each one of you is going to be asked to do some type of science communication about what you've learned so that others can learn from you. That's really awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. And Wildcrats is, I think, the best kids nature show that ever existed. Like their accuracy rates is just without parallel. I mean, I used to watch that show with my son. He's 12 now. And I mean, whenever I watch kids shows about science, there's always like, oh, that's not entirely true. That's mostly true, but they got that one detail wrong. I have never heard them get a detail wrong. All the years I watched that show. It's amazing.
Oh.
Yeah.
One more from Amelia, and then we got to go. Amelia, do you have a question?
And just a comment. So when you showed the hairy, what are they called?
The flies
the
that aren't
caterpillars?
bees? Oh,
Yeah, the hairy caterpillars. It brought me memories from when I lived in Uruguay. They were this very ugly, hairy, spiky caterpillars that were striped black and red. And they were like getting the house and stuff, but you couldn't pick them up or kill them or you would get poisoned.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds like a lime-coated caterpillar, and they're notorious for that. Yeah.
Ooh. I'm glad you didn't bring any to Idaho with you when you moved here, Amelia. Dan, thank you so very much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for contributing. We are going to weave this in with all of our other learning and go to Yellowstone and look for some bugs.
Great. Well, it's nice meeting you all, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Everybody can unmute and say goodbye.
Bye. See you at Yellowstone.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye. Bye. Yellowstone.